Good morning and welcome to JobsOhio's second quarterly Board of Directors meeting. We are pleased to be joined together today in the glass city of Toledo, Ohio. And a warm welcome to my fellow board members, JP Nassif and members of the JobsOhio management team, and our invited guests, and those joining at home. Thank you all for making time to join us this morning. This past quarter has seen successful air service routes continue to take off around Ohio, including the inaugural flight from Cleveland to Dublin, Ireland via Aer Lingus, British Airways soon to launch inaugural flight from Cincinnati to London, and United's announcement last week of direct air service from Dayton to Denver. All these flights help build upon the needs of businesses looking to connect their people and clients to Ohio. While air service grows around the state, we continue to pursue deals in an active and full pipeline. That being said, we are aware of the challenges our financial institutions have endured, continued high inflation haunting investment decisions, and uncertain geopolitical flashpoints around the globe. As Ohio continues to navigate their ever-shifting economic landscape, it is still our incredibly positive news to note that our state's unemployment rate was recently the lowest in 47 years, which comes from the leadership, vision, collaboration from the DeWine Husted administration, our elected leaders across the state, the business community at large, and JobsOhio's commitment to producing results at a world-class level in these challenging times. You'll hear more about JobsOhio's team performance later from JP, as he will provide a deeper dive into JobsOhio's performance as well as the economic outlook. Before we start the meeting, I would like to welcome Lieutenant Governor Jon Husted, who I think is joining us by phone. At least we think he's connected, but he's going to share his thoughts and comments this morning. Lieutenant Governor, are you on? Not yet, sir. All right. Well, let's proceed with our meeting, and then when we get word that the Lieutenant Governor is on, then we'll interrupt our meeting at that point and hear his comments. So if we could go to our first action item is to approve our minutes from March the 2nd. Is there a motion to approve?
Move for the approval, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed? And now let's go to the President's report. JP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and guests here today. Pleased to share JobsOhio's progress toward capturing the state's generational opportunity. As Governor DeWine probably says it best, it is Ohio's time. But to really understand the significance of those four words, it's important to consider what Ohio has been through to get here. Ohio and other Midwestern states were an industrial powerhouse, as you all know, before World War II, but by the 60s, our grip on location economics began to slip with the emergence of site selection consultants who aggressively marketed lower-cost greenfield alternatives in industrial sites in the South and the West. And new technologies, like the air conditioner, made southern states much more livable. The great migration to the South and the West began, and by the 70s and the 80s, the migration of jobs and capital investment to those low-cost Sun Belt states led to factory closures that cynics exploited to brand the entire Midwest as a Rust Belt. It was classic, out with the old, in with the new thinking, which was made worse as many industries focused on cost versus value. The Midwest's woes were accelerated with trade policy decisions like NAFTA that permanently normalized trade relations with China and opened the floodgates of globalization and offshoring that continued to hollow out most of America's industrial core, shifting nearly 1 million U.S. manufacturing jobs across the southern border and overseas to Asia in just over a decade. These industrial and trade migrations hit Ohio especially hard. Ohio lost approximately 750,000 manufacturing jobs between 1969 and 2009. And by 2011, Ohio's economy had hit rock bottom. Ohio had the second highest number of job losses in America. It ranked near the bottom of all 50 states for economic growth, and just one better than dead last for growth in 10 critical industry sectors that fueled our state's economy. Fortunately, Ohio's policymakers, elected officials, and others began to advocate and fight back by implementing critical reforms to improve our state's business climate, because it's what Ohioans do. Roll up our sleeves when there's a challenge, and we get down to the business of fixing it and making it better. Jobs Ohio was launched in 2011 to catalyze job creation and economic development, and the DeWine Husted administration is leading alongside the state legislature to make Ohio an attractive state for business by addressing complex tax regulations and by passing mega project incentives, helping to make us more competitive. I see we have Ohio's Lieutenant Governor has joined us. He's on the road and mobile around the state. Mr. Chairman, would you like to introduce the Lieutenant Governor?
I would, and I would note for the record, the Lieutenant Governor, I can see his face here. He's in the car, but he is not driving.
Correct.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you for joining us. I know your schedule is busy. You and the governor both spend an inordinate amount of time traveling the state and making sure you're listening to the people of Ohio and sharing the priorities that the administration has. So, Lieutenant Governor, if you would.
Thanks, Chairman Smith and JP. I really appreciate your giving me a chance to share a few words. I have, as you know, I travel around everywhere I can, try to get to all parts of the state. It's interesting, our strategy for the longest time. I actually met with a group of developers from Kentucky to Michigan to Indiana to Pennsylvania yesterday. And they were wondering about, how all of the success that we were enjoying in Ohio occurred. And while I didn't share all of the secrets, I did share with them that it's been a 30-year strategy that has led to some of what people on the outside of Ohio perceive as overnight successes. And certainly Jobs Ohio is a big component of that. But we have record low unemployment rate, 3.7%. We've been creating 6,600 jobs a month on average over the last 12 months. And the challenge we have now is going to be a workforce one. It's a demographic one that we are very plugged into with what we hope to achieve in our budget process. But I will add this to your list of things to consider, that I do believe that housing is emerging as a challenge. We are seeing housing inflation in Ohio that exceeds the national average, not something that we typically have seen.
This is why the broadband initiative that the governor, lieutenant governor are implementing is going to be so important. It's
We'll give him a minute or so, see if he gets in a better place here.
Let's give it a minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
we lost him.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll continue. We were talking about the great work our elected officials and policymakers did taking us from a bottom 10 business climate state to a top 10 business climate state. And the factors have combined, with post-pandemic market trends to create this generational opportunity that we're in the middle of right now. Since 2011, Ohio's national rankings have soared. Ohio is one of the 10 best states for business, affordability, access to capital, labor productivity, industrial diversity, and more. And we have the Lieutenant Governor back. Lieutenant Governor Husted.
I apologize. I'm mobile. Look, I'll just make a quick point. I think that the economy is moving along great. We're well positioned to continue to land more prospects, but some of the challenges of success are beginning to emerge. I think housing is one of them. We've seen a lot of housing inflation in Ohio because of lack of supply. And I do think that this should be an important consideration as part of our state and Jobs Ohio's strategy. I mean, just to think about, not that you have a role in necessarily providing the housing, But what I would suggest to you is that making sure that we have an ample supply of housing is a critical element of our success, because you can't create a job unless you have a place for that. I'll just add that to the list of things that I think that I would value continuing to hear about as we forward with Ohio's really aggressive growth strategies that were
So if I could, we've lost him again, obviously, but he's making a very significant point. We had some discussion yesterday around the importance of housing throughout the state, whether it's in our cities or our rural areas. Some of our rural areas are now experiencing growth again, and the first thing that pops up is, do we have housing for the workers that we're attracting? And so it's an area that we'll be looking at in terms of how we shine a spotlight on the issue and do our part to help be part of the problem. So.
Lieutenant Governor's back.
I don't want to interrupt your meeting anymore. You got the point. Things are going well. We're creating jobs faster so we can find people to fill them. We got to focus on our strategies regarding workforce, but housing is an issue that is emerging that I think is an important issue for us to tackle, because to keep that competitive advantage of affordable cost of living, housing is emerging as something we must address. So thanks for your service on the board and for the work you're doing at Jobs Ohio.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. Safe travels.
Thank you. Well, it is interesting. Just a few years ago, it would have been not a completely common practice to have people join in via video and audio technology. So it's a wonderful utility we have, and sometimes the technology is not completely seamless, but we appreciate the Lieutenant Governor joining us, and we embrace the use of technology to help us provide more coverage and economic development. So back to the stats that Ohio is on a roll. We are a new Ohio with the same values. So it's gratifying and a very historical reversal that Ohio is ranked number 2 in the country for industrial reshoring and foreign direct investment. We are a global state. Meanwhile, next generation industries are taking root and flight right here in our state. The rankings are a sight to see. I'd like to present them because they really show how far we've come, and they recognize the hard work that Ohioans have done together, and also represent the opportunity that's in front of us. And Northwest Ohio has been a significant part of the state's turnaround. The region hosts the headquarters of 4 Fortune 500 companies: Marathon, the Andersons, Dana, Owens Corning, all call this a vibrant, resourceful region their home. It's a testament to the skilled workforce here, the excellent quality of life, and the diversity of our economy. And over the last decades, more companies have been investing in the future of manufacturing right here. And it's just not automotive manufacturing. Companies like First Solar, Whirlpool, Procter & Gamble made investments here in the last year. Jobs Ohio's 10-sector strategy leads to economic diversity and creates resiliency in the economy. And Northwest Ohio's rankings continue to be a solid reflection of that. Companies serious about supply chain security are looking at and choosing Northwest Ohio. Jobs Ohio is committed to the success of Northwest Ohio and its companies and employees. In fact, in 2021, Jobs Ohio and our partners at the RGP and the City of Toledo partnered to help out Libby, a 130-year-old Toledo company. 2 years later, we're happy to report that Libby has overperformed, adding $2 million in payroll above their commitments and outperforming their capital investment goals by investing more than $23 million. With the #1 ranking for economic activity among Tier 2 metros nationwide, it's fair to say that the Glass City is hot. And there's ample evidence that the entire state is thriving as well. This is a statewide, cross-sector phenomenon. Jobs Ohio and our partners have recorded record-breaking performances by Ohio business in back-to-back years for new job creation, payroll creation, and in 2022, setting a new record for capital investment by over 300% the previous mark set in 2017. At the same time, JobsOhio teams working with our partners continually deliver world-class customer service that's helping Ohio compete and win the critical projects that will produce a return on investment for years to come. Again, that customer service is important because it goes to our state's reputation, and Ohio and Ohioans are world-class, and it's wonderful to see that being reflected by a third-party net promoter. And since 2019, thanks going to the JobsOhio board for approving an ambitious, scope-expanding 5-year plan. Project wins are up nearly 40%. New job generation jumped by close to 15%. New capital investments by over 75%. And payroll grew by over 30%. This amounts to a complete 180-degree turnaround and recovery for Ohio's 10 resilient industry sectors that JobsOhio was created to specifically focus on. In the 10 years before JobsOhio was created, unemployment in those strategically important, higher-paying sectors fell by 18%, more than 18%. That was a loss of over 200,000 high-wage, high-quality-of-life jobs. And in a little over a decade, JobsOhio's 10-sector strategy continues to bring those jobs back, creating more diversity in the economy. And we've done it through impact investments and a variety of innovative programs that give Ohio a competitive advantage. Each deal is constructed in a customized way to deliver value to all parties, regardless of size, regardless of industry, to always provide a return on investment to Ohioans. And we measure that return in a very conservative way. 2 primary ways. One is the payroll taxes from the net new jobs created from each deal always must be more than the incentives that went into winning the deal in the first place. So even when you see large numbers for these deals, just know they are producing a net return for the state of Ohio in the form of payroll taxes that go back to the state treasury that our elected representatives can then use for very important services back to Ohio's citizens. And the second way is our staff continuously works to improve deal-making. Economic development deal-making is both a science and an art. And our team, working with our partners, has been honing those skills and program management to return more value and productivity per dollar of JobsOhio's payroll and capital investment. As you can see from this multicolored chart, the value of JobsOhio projects continues to return more payroll tax to the state per incentive dollar than ever before, driving an ROI to record levels. In fact, the net present value earned per each of JobsOhio's full-time employees surged from $3.1 million per employee in 2018 to just shy of $7 million per employee in 2022. And we've been recognized as being in the top 1% of private not-for-profit companies for our corporate governance and our transparency. Ohio's recent momentum is statewide and multi-sector, including 4 mega projects, second most in America for last year, hundreds of strategically important projects like GM's Toledo propulsion plant, which brought GM's electric vehicle propulsion manufacturing to the U.S. for the first time right here in Northwest Ohio. Abbott Labs' decision to locate their new powder nutrition plant here in Bowling Green. And on top of that, we've worked with our partners to implement over 300 inclusive economic development projects and significant new air service projects across the state. As part of the 2020 scope expansion, Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted challenged JobsOhio to do more to ensure that all Ohioans in all parts of the state can participate in Ohio's economic renaissance. And that drove our inclusive economic development strategy, which has 4 elements. And Northwest Ohio, thanks to the great work of Dean Monsky, RGP, and our partners, have really taken advantage of those programs. The first is a program designed to help legacy Ohio communities attract investment and spur development. The second is to empower business owners in underrepresented population groups to access economic tools previously relegated to only large, more mature companies. Third, provide technical assistance for communities to develop their own sustainable economic development plans. And number 4, to ensure more Ohioans have access to high-speed internet, whether they're mobile or not. JobsOhio's Vibrant Community Program supports these kind of catalytic development projects. We call them in Ohio's hallmark towns, wonderful small communities all over our state. For every dollar JobsOhio has invested in this catalytic program, over 8 additional dollars have been invested from other sources. One great example is happening in Lima's Central District, and I believe also we have one of those projects in Van Wert. Those small communities, lots of pride, lots of passion, and they make a wonderful quality of life living alternative for the next generation worker and family. It's a product Ohio has that not every state has, and we should be proud of it, and we're happy to continue to invest. JobsOhio's inclusion grants are also providing statewide impact by helping Ohio business owners in underrepresented populations or distressed communities build their own version of the American dream and strengthen Ohio. It's an amazing program, and again, RGP and the team here has really taken advantage of that, and I would encourage you to continue to do that. So what's next on the horizon? There's plenty on the horizon. As we move forward, we're encouraged by the number and scale of the deals we are seeing in our pipeline. Ohio is clearly now on the mind of companies looking for a favorable business climate combined with the quality of life. But for all the positive indicators, we don't operate in a vacuum. We cannot ignore the macroeconomic trends. Inflation is still running red hot. Interest rates remain high. Market volatility provides additional uncertainty. These uncertainties are weighing on corporate investment capital, and we're seeing delays in final investment decisions. So we've got a record number of deals in our pipeline and a record slowdown of how long it takes for those companies to make decisions on where they will make their investments. Deals that typically take an average of 250 to 300 days to close are now taking more than 400 days, and that number seems to be creeping up. Many smaller companies are getting squeezed for liquidity, yet unemployment is at a record low. You heard earlier that we're at an all-time low based on when these statistics have been tracked. As of April 2023, all of 88 of Ohio counties had lower unemployment rates than in February of 2020, before the onset of the pandemic. And as we've seen in the past, contradictions in one company or one sector can be a boon to all other businesses in other sectors, making Ohio's economic diversity a strength, because economic diversity equals economic resilience. Ohio is now the 8th most diverse state economy in the U.S. and is diversifying at a faster pace than the rest of our Midwestern counterparts. The $32 billion in capital investment secured in 2022 accelerated this trend, and more opportunities are coming. Currently, more than a dozen mega projects are still in the pipeline. These are projects that generate significant payroll, over $75 million in annual payroll, and over 3 times the federal minimum wage as an average wage. So, Mr. Chairman, with Ohio near the top of every national ranking and leading the renaissance of the American Midwest, as the governor says, this is indeed Ohio's time. And this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. Are there any questions for the president from members of the board?
It sounds to me like we could hold a funeral for the phrase Rust Belt.
Well said.
And that's a very good point, Mr. Platt. I agree. And at the same time, sticks and stones, we'll keep moving forward, and we'll be the best Ohio we can be. But I do think the term Rust Belt can be officially put in the ground.
All right, before we turn to the committee reports, I just want to remind folks that the board met actually Wednesday night, most of the evening, all day yesterday, to go over a lot of issues in our committee meetings and deliberations, and I really commend the board for your dedication and bringing your A game to the conversation, so thank you for that. The committee reports, I'll start with the executive committee. We met twice this quarter, which is somewhat typical now, each beginning and with the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Yesterday's meeting began with executive session with legal counsel to discuss various legal matters involving the JobsOhio Corporation. During each of its meetings, the committee reviewed, discussed, and recommended approval of the annual strategic plan of the corporation as required by statute. The committee also reviewed the draft of the 2022 annual report and 2023 strategic plan document that would be finalized for release to the public prior to July 1 of this year, in compliance, again, with Ohio statutes. The committee also reviewed its charter at both meetings and recommended approval of subtle changes to the attendance and director support and education provisions of our charter. At its May 17th meeting, the committee acted on behalf of JobsOhio as the sole member of the JobsOhio beverage system to recommend election of a new director to the JobsOhio beverage system board of directors, Mr. Vale Miller, to a 3-year term commencing July 1 of this year. Also, at its May 17th meeting, the committee acted to fill the vacancy in the statutory office of the treasurer of the corporation, existing as a result of the resignation of Brian Faust from that office effective May 1 of this year. And we appointed Director John Bishop to serve as the interim corporate treasurer until further action by the board. And finally, the committee began a detailed review and discussion of the corporation's professional services and consulting agreements with the purpose of identifying improvements in the manner in which such agreements are sourced, managed, and held to compliance. Any questions for the executive committee? Then let's move to the audit committee. Dr. Jerry Sue Thornton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Audit Committee of the JobsOhio Board of Directors met yesterday, June 1st, and reviewed and approved the minutes of the March 1st, 2023 meeting. The first item of business was the FY 2023 fourth quarter compliance update presented by Managing Director for Enterprise Risk, Claudia Harrington. She discussed the statutory requirements and deadlines to be met by JobsOhio as part of the financial disclosure statement, joint legislative ethics committee filing, annual report by the ORC, and the controlling board submission. She also updated the committee on the 100% completion by staff of the 2023 second quarter IT security training. She then provided a detailed update on the JobsOhio enterprise risk, with cybersecurity being the highest priority. She outlined and detailed any potential litigation as well as legal expenditures. Next on our agenda, Julie Battles, Senior Managing Director of JobsOhio, and Todd Bunchy, Director of Accounting, provided the third quarter financial update for 2023. Statements of the net position of JobsOhio were reviewed, as well as the consolidated financial position, as well as the 5-year consolidated position. So we reviewed the budget from many different aspects. The proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2024 was presented, beginning with a narrative that included resources, our use of talent and people, business and funding impacts of the budget. A thorough description of the budget planning process was outlined, along with the operating comparisons over a 3-year period, fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. The proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2024 was reviewed by the committee, and it was moved and seconded and voted to be brought forward to the full board. And it was brought forward to the full board with approval at its meeting. We would like to certainly acknowledge the individuals who worked on the budget for 2024, Brian Faust, Julie Battles, and their team. And certainly the board appreciates all of the effort that was put into the preparation of that budget, which is a decrease of 7.2% over the fiscal 2023 budget. So it certainly means our team, our staff, JP, your team, thinks about the way in which we spend dollars toward the budget. With that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Any questions for Dr. Thornton? The next committee is the Compensation and Workforce. General Lester Lyles is with us remotely this morning from his home in Virginia. General Lyles has learned that 4-star generals really don't retire. Both the White House and the Pentagon have tapped him for leadership roles in a couple significant advisory boards, and requires him to be in D.C. Frequently. So General Lyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. And my apologies for not being able to be there in the great Toledo area in person. The JobsOhio Compensation and Workforce Committee met once during the quarter. We began with the approval of the minutes of the 1 March meeting, and a discussion of the committee's work plan. This is a good governance sort of approach to review the plans for all of our meetings, particularly over the calendar year, to make sure that we're meeting the objectives at each one of our meetings. At this week's meeting, the committee received and discussed commentary from its independent compensation consultant, Pay Governance, on current topics and national perspectives that relate to corporate compensation and benefits trends. Also at this meeting, the JobsOhio Managing Director of Human Resources, Ms. Sheila Akins, provided updates on the corporation's employee health and retirement benefits, which are in great shape. The majority of this meeting focused on a discussion of the ongoing human capital assessment of the corporation that's being conducted by McKinsey & Company in order to learn how JobsOhio measured against the characteristics of any other high-performing team, to learn any gaps, if there are any, whether we have the right people in the right jobs and the right organization structure, and to bridge those gaps if any of them exist. The purpose of this assessment is really to provide input to the CEO and to the board, but specifically to allow the CEO to make changes in either organizational structure, key people, or the workload of the corporation. The inputs from McKinsey's report will be provided to JP Nassif, the CEO. It will be provided to the board. And within future meetings, we'll get a chance to assess and see if any changes are necessary and how the organization is structured. And I'm pretty sure we're going to find that we're in great shape in terms of our peers, how we compare to peers around the country. Finally, the committee held an executive session to conclude the meeting. With that summary, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my report.
Thank you, General Lyles. Any questions? Let's move to the last committee report, Mr. John Bishop, Investment Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our committee met yesterday morning, and we began the meeting with a review of the minutes of our last meeting, March 1st, which were approved. During the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, which is this previous quarter, the committee reviewed and approved or recommended a total of $111 million in incentives in 3 core economic development projects. The companies involved in those 3 core projects, just by themselves, agreed to commit to create 1,879 new jobs with an associated new payroll of over $132 million. Those companies will also make capital investments in Ohio of nearly $630 million. During yesterday's meeting, the committee also recommended approval to the full board for 4 major contracts for services for various marketing initiatives during the coming fiscal year. In addition, the committee recommended to the full board, and which was approved, the 4th year of funding for the JobsOhio Growth Capital Program. That brings our total commitment to $200 million over the last 4 years. That's a unique vehicle that provides venture capital funding for new startup industries in many cases, and it's been a tremendous success. During yesterday's meeting, the committee received the quarterly report from our corporation's investment portfolio advisors, our outside advisors, if you will, which are Cardinal Investments. In their quarterly report, they also provided, we also reviewed an update of the aforementioned growth capital program, which was very strong for the quarter. Mr. Chairman, with that, that completes the Investment Committee's report.
Thank you, John. Any questions for the Investment Committee Chair? With that, we'll move to the section of the agenda we call Final Thoughts. We ask each board member to kind of share some summary comments based on what they've heard and observed over the last couple of days. So we'll begin this session with Director Lori Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I reflect back on our meetings yesterday and the evening prior, I think, I think back to, I witnessed just such an incredible organization and just how, we have made significant progress on the processes that we have in place. And I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way. We have great processes in place. But I think what's really unique when I reflected on the past couple days is how the JobsOhio team members, they want to, question the standard processes. They want to go out of house and benchmark, best practices with outside companies. And they just have this continuous improvement and this improvement and growth mindset to just always get better. And so I think I was excited to see that. I think a couple examples yesterday when I reflected back that stood out in my mind: the budgeting process, the risk process, cyber, human capital. I mean, the list goes on and on. All great processes, but just how they're looking to improve those, I felt that was really positive. And so kudos to the team and the leaders that facilitate that type of environment here at JobsOhio.
Thank you. John Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I really would want to echo some of the comments that we've already heard today about the very positive condition that the state of Ohio currently has relative to economic factors and conditions, and particularly compared to many other states. As being one of those people that's been around here since pretty much the inception of JobsOhio, I can't hesitate to not recall that JobsOhio was founded during a much darker period of time. I think many called it the last recession, the Great Recession. Our unemployment rate at the time when JobsOhio was created was over 10%. And that led to the Rust Belt comments that we've heard, and that just was at all-time high. Well, if you listen to the pundits and most of the business reporters now, I think they'll tell you if we're not already in a recession, about half of them think we're on the verge of one. And I take solace in the fact that we are in a much, much better position now than we were 10 years ago. As we've heard, the unemployment rate in the state of Ohio now is the lowest it's been in recorded history. I think 47 years, they said. Well, beyond that, you lose a lot of credibility. It's less than 4%, 3.5 or 3.4%. I had an economics professor up at Ohio Northern that used to say anything under 4% unemployment is really full employment. And that really leads me to what I think is the biggest challenge that we have in Ohio, and the biggest challenge that JobsOhio is addressing, and that is the deficit in talent. We can create, as we did yesterday, and this was something of a down quarter, 1,800 plus jobs. But we have to have people to fill those jobs. And when you have an unemployment rate that's almost non-existent, and we don't have a huge population growth, we have to create those and find those positions without just stealing one employee from one employer to move up. There's nothing wrong with moving up, but we have to have people to fill all the spots. So yes, as I reported earlier, we invested substantially, or approved investments in marketing programs that not only market the state of Ohio, which we've done a great job for the last 10 years, but also marketing the state of Ohio to prospective employees. We have to find ways to address our talent gap. And much as we've done for the last 10 years, I'm confident we have an organization in place that it's now matured after 10 years that will be up to meeting that challenge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, John. Scott Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and JP. A couple of years back, you all made the decision to move the quarterly meetings from city to city and to different places around Ohio. And last night we got to meet a lot of the folks from Ohio about Toledo and a lot of the issues that are important to them. And I want to thank you all for the hospitality and see a lot of familiar faces here. So thanks for doing what we do by moving this around. I also want to thank the JO team. All of the prep that goes into these meetings is pretty impressive. I was coming down the elevator today with the board books, and you don't want to overlook the amount of time and effort that goes into putting these on, as well as, the amount of content across, all the sectors, all the functional areas, whether that's the finance and compliance and strategy and business development. It's a very, very thorough, and really appreciate the time and effort that goes into it. And one of the things that I took away from the meeting, and I think JP talked about it in his comments, as did the Lieutenant Governor, is that it is a changing macroeconomic environment with inflation and what happens to timing on deals and so forth. A lot went into, on the finance side, the tightening of the belt on the budgets and the tweaking of the strategies, across the sectors. But the one thing that was consistent was that there was no change in the momentum. We're used to quarter over quarter, year over year, these last few years of just absolute record highs constantly. And there's no change in momentum of what's coming forward. So I'm hugely optimistic about how we're going to finish 23 and how we're really positioned in 24, really thanks to the incredible JobsOhio team, which includes the regional partners. So very happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Scott. Dr. Jerry Sue Thornton.
Well, I'd also like to say it's great to be in Northwest Ohio. Wonderful hospitality. I always enjoy getting out and going across the state and seeing what people are doing, and you're doing a lot of terrific things here in economic development. So kudos to Northwest Ohio, and thanks for the hospitality. I guess my takeaway from our couple of days of meetings is the fact that JobsOhio cares and cares about the entire state. As just mentioned, we have an opportunity as a board to travel around the state for our meetings, and that's been a wonderful thing, Mr. Chair, to go into every nook and cranny of Ohio and meet people and see what they're doing in economic development and the challenges that they have. But I think what I'm so impressed about with every meeting at JobsOhio, JP, is the fact that you as the leader and your team really care about the entire state of Ohio. And that when presentations are being made and discussions are happening, that it's always inclusive. It's not any one region, not any one area, not any one group of businesses, but throughout the state, it's very clear that your team is always thinking about all of the citizens, all of the residents, when they're making decisions about attracting businesses, reaching out with investments and so forth. And so it just came home to me again in this meeting here in Northeast Ohio about JobsOhio cares. You really are committed. And that's a wonderful thing, because it's easy to live in a particular area of Ohio and think about that, but you guys have a very broad perspective. And I really appreciate that as a board member.
Thanks, Jerry Sue. Rick Platt.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have two takeaways from our time in Northwest Ohio. One is we really are invested at JobsOhio in the idea that local impact matters. Manufacturing is Northwest Ohio's thing, that the nation really, and Ohio, owes a debt of gratitude for decades of the output that this region has given to defend our country and to provide the goods and services we need. Local communities in Toledo and Northwest Ohio, they know that manufacturing, though, never left. They know that R belt, we won't even use that R word in its full term, that label was never deserved. But I think the message now from JP's remarks, let's get ready. Manufacturing is roaring back. Ohio is proof of that, and Northwest Ohio is proof of that as well. And it's important that our support for the local communities getting more ready is critical. And that impact of that stretches beyond each of those local communities. The 3 days that we've been here in Toledo have impressed upon me that Toledo and Northwest Ohio's future, not without challenges, but there's reasons to be upbeat and bright. A second thought, I had a personal experience, a chance to visit a company that had chosen to make an expansion of their manufacturing interest into Ohio, but they're headquartered in Southern California. And recently visited there. I think this was unscripted, but I'm getting a tour from the CEO in their Orange County facility, and one of the employees came up and said, "Hey, I want to relocate to Ohio." I couldn't get my business card out fast enough. What I found from the CEO, that's not the first time that's happened. So I think it's real. I mean, so that same theme of let's get ready that's an anecdotal story, but I think it's real. That something that we almost have to pinch ourselves. Is this really happening? That Ohio is thought of as a place to not only relocate business to, but people to. And I think that applaud Northwest Ohio for being a welcoming place. We welcome people from Michigan here, for crying out loud. So
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay. At any rate, those are my thoughts. Local impact matters, and let's get ready.
Thank you. General Lester Lyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, even though I'm not there physically, my personal takeaway is really a big smile. As I listened to the deliberations yesterday and participated in our board meeting deliberations yesterday and the day before, I couldn't help but just getting a great feeling of success, dedication, loyalty, and lots of opportunity, all engendered by the great things that JobsOhio is doing and the JobsOhio has on its job jar to do for the future. So I feel very, very good about that. I couldn't help but thinking last week I had an opportunity to participate in an event, the fourth annual event of the Ohio Space Forum. It was conducted in Cleveland and sponsored by JobsOhio. And it really was indicative to me of all the great things that JP and his wonderful team are doing. And team includes the regional partners like the Dayton Development Coalition, like NEO, like around Toledo, et cetera. What got me was not just the statistics on what's going on in Ohio. You heard the Lieutenant Governor mention that. You heard JP mention that. But being in an event like that, I'm sure it's very much like some of the board members have said from your personal involvement there in Toledo. There's a feel watching the people attending the event, listening to their comments, both publicly and just talking privately, how they feel about Ohio and how they feel about what JobsOhio is really, really doing. So my takeaways are very, very positive, feel very, very good. I have to admit, I have another takeaway that I need to get to Toledo because I haven't been there in a long time. And so I owe that, if you will, to the community and to myself. And then finally, as Rick mentioned about the R word, I certainly agree we should avoid that word. But you touched on at the very end, the M word. My twin daughters went to The Ohio State University, and we do not use the M word in our house. There's a new M word, however, that I think Rick talked about in terms of manufacturing. Manufacturing is back, and that to me is the right M word to use in Ohio. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, General Lyles. And our president, JP Nassif, always gets the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Lyles, that was a quotable one. We'll use that one again. That was good. Appreciate the opportunity. Close out with gratitude. Ohio is a special place. You all know that. All of those of you that are here, we've got this incredible platform called Team Ohio. JobsOhio is a unique part of that, but Team Ohio is our team. And I think the economic development platform we have and that we're talking about today reflects all the unique greatness of our state. We are very different and diverse in terms of our communities. We have the three C's. We have Toledo and Dayton and Akron and Youngstown, and we have these wonderful hallmark towns and wide open spaces. And if you go to any one of them, you might think these people don't have anything in common with each other. But the truth is that we do. We do. And that diversity is really a strength because we offer so many choices and options, but we do all come together to fight for our state and for what we believe in and what we value. And much of that is reflected here, but it does start with our governor, our lieutenant governor, volunteers on this board, our partners like RGP, and we've got, again, partners come here today. We rally around each other because we're a part of the same team. And, we've got Mark Patton from One Columbus here today, who also happens to be one of the founders of JobsOhio. Mike Jacoby from Ohio Southeast, who's coming off of a record year that they've had in Ohio Southeast. Christine Nelson from Team NEO, the neighbors just to the east, because Bill Kaler took the inaugural trip to Dublin on the new Cleveland service. It's a wonderful team. and it's reflected here today. Our local partners, regional partners, our federal delegation, our wonderful federal employees at NASA, at 178th, at our guard bases, and our citizens that are running and producing the value, the state payroll taxes, and the job creation. So I want to thank this board that's volunteering and spending time and energy, the boards of the RGP and our regional partners, of the chamber partners that are here and of all the jurisdictions, and of course our elected officials at every level that are on the front lines and putting themselves out there to help make the state recognized for what it is. It's one of the best places to live your own unique version of the American dream, whether you're in Toledo or in Dayton or in Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Appalachia. And so very grateful for the opportunity. And one more note, we've got a tremendous momentum. You've heard about it today. We've also are seeing the economic cycle dance with us a bit. And the wonderful thing about being in Ohio is we are no stranger to adversity. We know how to roll up our sleeves and work together and overcome it. So when an economic cycle does come home to roost, and they always do, we will be well equipped to come together, to find a way to roll up our sleeves and to persevere through it. And it's thanks to the people in this room today. So very grateful on behalf of the JobsOhio team and the professionals that I go to work with every day who are wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, JP. Your comments about the thankful and gratitude reminded me of a wise man once said that to know happiness is to know gratitude. And so I echo the thoughts that have been shared around appreciation for Dean and your team for hosting us, the Glass City Center here in Toledo for the environment here. It's a beautiful complex. I've not been here before. The views are spectacular. Thanks for all the JobsOhio partners, the network we have across the state, and especially our team, all the colleagues of JobsOhio. You really work hard, and I have come to appreciate just the challenges that all economic professionals have, because everybody's got an opinion about how to do it better, how to spend money better, and you have to listen to that, you have to hear that and process it, as we do as board members, and try to make good decisions. But the evidence is pretty compelling that it's working, and so it happens because of all of us working together. So thank you. Final thought is our next meeting is on Friday, September 15th. We determined the location, JP. Do you remember? Shouldn't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Anyway, we'll get back to you where that will be. It will be another place throughout the state. These state visits have been very rewarding and gratifying for us. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.